Okay, we're ready.
Okay, cool. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. 1 second. Let me move everybody around. All right, so I did the first part of chapter 9, feminism targeting the feminine enemies in our culture. And the beginning part of the chapter talks about levels of prevention. So the primary prevention would be a prevention that helps by encouraging healthy individuals to stay healthy. Secondary prevention, this prevention assists individuals who begin to show symptoms of problems in order to prevent further progression into a diagnosable disorder or medical disease. And then tertiary prevention, also known as treatment, this prevention helps diagnose individuals, avoid further adverse effects such as disability or death. Some examples of levels of prevention relating to fat talk. So a primary prevention example would be targeting individuals who are not yet affected by fat talk, but could become vulnerable to the critical dialogue. Secondary prevention example would be targeting individuals who are beginning to experience adverse effects from regularly partaking in fat talk dialogue. And then tertiary prevention examples would be targeting individuals with poor body image, low self-esteem, and eating disorders, furthermore encouraging them to get professional help. So some questions that I've got, and I can post these in the chat as well, but what are examples of fat talk preventions that you've previously heard of? Is there a way to encompass all individuals within one intervention? And how can we encourage women to reduce their engagement? Let me post those really quickly. So I personally, prior to reading this book, actually had not heard of any preventions. I honestly hadn't even heard of fat talk. So I was just curious if anybody else had heard of preventions or had heard of fat talk prior to now.
I have in some of my other classes that are more health-based and like public health classes.
I also, pertaining to the second question, I think it would be really hard to encompass individuals from a primary prevention standpoint and a tertiary prevention standpoint within one prevention, just because they're at such different places. So yeah, I don't know how we could include everybody. I feel like there would have to be different ways we would go about it.
I'm curious, Jama, within public health, have you heard this called, because it's got different names. Sometimes it's called universal interventions, specific interventions. But I was trying to call it primary, secondary, tertiary.
I've heard it as primary, secondary, tertiary. I haven't heard it as universal, like maybe as like a side, it can also be known as, but typically in my classes, I've learned it as primary, secondary, tertiary.
Yeah, and it sounds like, Sarah, you can kind of understand how it'd be difficult to target people sitting in those different levels all at the same time.
Yeah. What about encouraging women to reduce their engagement in fat talk?
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, I know I have trouble sometimes. But I talked about this a little bit in my reflection, but I think one of the biggest things for like reducing it is just, like you said, Sarah, you didn't really know about this before. And I'm like kind of in the same boat. I never really thought about it. So honestly, just getting the word out there that like of what fat talk is, because so many people just don't think about it and don't understand the harmful effects of it. And now that I know about that, it's like I am looking for it constantly everywhere. And so I feel like that's one big thing is just, you know, getting more people to know about it. But
no, absolutely. I mean, it's actually kind of funny because I was talking with my friends about my presentation, and I was trying to explain to them what fat talk was because they didn't know. They had no idea. And I gave them examples and they were like, oh. And then they reflected on their personal relationships outside of our big friend group. And they're like, yeah, so and so makes comments like that. Like, yeah, well, that's an example. So I think just informing, trying to educate people is important. Anybody else have anything? Let me share screen.
I think it would be interesting to implement a program kind of like the DARE program that we did back in elementary school, but implementing something like that of like addressing like body image, specifically in both males and females, because I know that both genders face it, especially females. But I think that might be an interesting way to like educate at a young age, but then also like can you navigate it with your friends and yourself?
That's a good point. Thank you. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Okay, so Mann and colleagues, they had a panel of individuals who talked about recovering from an eating disorder. And the speakers talked about their personal stories to an audience, but what they thought was a good idea wasn't necessarily a good idea. Unfortunately, the individual stories failed to acknowledge the individuals who continue to suffer from an eating disorder, and that could result in disability and sometimes death. So how, pertaining to this study, how can what seems to be a good idea backfire?
And you see the same thing in the suicide prevention literature. What used to be done in a lot of programs to try to reach people who might need to be reaching out for help. It was the same kind of thing. The people who were speaking were the people who lived, not the people who had died of suicide, as an example.
And I could also see where it would be triggering for audience members who are currently dealing with an eating disorder and them seeing somebody who had recovered, but possibly internalizing that and beating themselves up for maybe not being close to feeling like they can be recovered, or I don't know how to word that, but like over analyzing maybe just a little bit about where they're at in their process or in their recovery. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any thoughts?
And then you all know the actor Jane Fonda, right? She had quite a battle with bulimia when she was a younger person, but she talked about how she learned about the possibility reading about the Roman Empire, where individuals would go to these feasts and they would binge eat, and then they would go to these bathrooms and vomit and then go eat more. And that's where she was kind of like, oh, like I can't eat whatever I want. I just need to throw it up afterwards. And I think most of us, know about that possibility, and that doesn't mean we engage in it, but certain things can trigger certain people.
All right. Okay, so Mann et al. They recruited 509 first-year female students from an Ivy League, and these women were surveyed at 3 separate time intervals, referred to as time 1, time 2, and time 3. They were surveyed about demographics, eating behavior, body image, and self-esteem. And time 1 occurred 3 months later, and half of the participants were asked to participate in an eating disorders prevention program, and the other half of the women were used as a control group, so they did not participate in the prevention program. And the intervention sessions lasted 90 minutes, and they included audiences anywhere from 10 to 20 women. And the panel included one individual recovering from anorexia nervosa, while the other panel member had recovered from bulimia nervosa. And 4 weeks after the intervention meetings, time 2 surveys were distributed. And then 12 weeks after the intervention meetings, time 3 surveys were distributed. And what they found from the study was that those who attended the interventions compared to the control group suggested more symptoms of an eating disorder than those in the control group. So this kind of proved further the Mann and colleagues study where they had individuals come in and talk on a panel that it wasn't a good idea after all, but this actually scientifically proved that. So then we have the body project that was talked about. It's a cognitive dissonance-based intervention. It encouraged young women to assess our culture's thin ideal beauty standard. And what it did was it had the women critique the thin ideal through verbal, written, or behavioral exercises. And what they found from this was that feminist tones arose from exercises from the women that partook in the body project, and a backlash against cultural and evolutionary forces occurred. And so Becker and colleagues reviewed the body project and they found that it was effective. They had a control group and then they had women participate in the body project. And what their experiment found was that the women that partaked in the body project were less likely to have body dissatisfaction, internalization of the thin ideal, dieting, and eating disordered behaviors. So how can women who benefited from the body project continue to maintain a positive body image, lack of internalization of the thin ideal, reduced dieting, and reduced disordered behaviors?
Has anybody in here participated in the one at ASU? Oh, Peyton, that's right. Yeah, when you were on my team. Peyton, can you tell what you remember about it and what it was like? Oh, she's traveling.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I had to travel because I was in the solarium, but my microphone doesn't work. I think everybody was able to share. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. We all like shared personal, like not stories, but like what we experienced with our body image and like what's been hard or like easy for us. And it was cool because like the group of women that I was with, I felt like we didn't really know each other before we went into it, but we were all like kind of close after it because we like were vulnerable with one another. And I think it helped me a lot to like hear what other people had to say about it, about their body image, and like being able to share with a group of people that it was like the purpose of being there was like to talk about body image. So I didn't feel like me sharing was like a burden or like anybody else felt that way. So it was a really cool, like I would recommend it to anybody if they got the chance. And I left feeling like very educated about like all the matters of body image and what other women like go through, because like it's easy to know your experience, but it was cool that I got to hear what other people felt around it as well.
Mm-hmm. And when I did the training, one of the exercises that they did as a homework assignment, and you probably remember this too, Peyton, was they would write a letter to a girl. And some of them wrote to like a younger sister that they had, some, you know, a friend's child, some wrote to themselves as a little girl. And in the follow-up session, they read aloud their letters, and they had me in tears. I mean, it was sort of this this kind of moment of like what I know now as an adult, I wish I would have known, or I wish other little girls would have known. And it was just very touching and very moving. And then they don't describe it this way, but there was a lot of practicing how to resist fat talk. They didn't call it that, but there was a lot of, do you remember that part, Peyton, where So it was just really practicing that. So
Yeah,
that,
I remember at one point we like discussed like one area of our body, or like one thing that was like challenging for us in terms of like body image. And like I think that was really interesting, because then we talked about like ways that we were going to challenge that. Like I remember one girl was talking about like she felt really self-conscious about her arms, and so like her goal was going to be to like wear like tank tops and like shirts that made her feel like uncomfortable, with the purpose of like pushing through it and like being able to resist the like urge to just like disparage yourself, instead of like challenging yourself to do something like different, I guess.
yeah, I do remember hearing a good bit of that, of people realizing kind of avoidance behaviors that they engaged in, and then wanting to commit to, you know, to be freer, to be freer and not be so avoidant or have to be so challenging to themselves. I also remember just hearing a lot about moms. And as a mother, I don't like blaming moms for anything, but there was just a lot of like gals talking about, you know, I really want to break out of this, but my mom's still in that mode of worried about her body, talking about it a lot, complaining. And it was like, oh yeah, that's a delicate kind of thing. And then I also heard some interesting conflicts where some of the gals would say when they go home, their mom pushes food on them, but then set, you know, will note things like, oh, you've gained weight, you know, oh, like you've gained weight, but then pushing food, you know, and just sort of like this, like, you know, it's like the magazines that, you know, have the desserts on the cover, and then, you know, the articles about how to lose weight kind of thing. It just, you know, it seems contradictory. Was there anything else you remember, Peyton, about it? It did start out with looking at cultural ideal. I do remember that. And then the presenter got up and just wrote everything out on the board. And then after, you know, they described what they consider to be cultural ideals, kind of asking, do you want to keep believing in this? You know, do you follow this? And that led to some really interesting kind of critique of media, social media, public media, that type of thing.
One thing that I think was really cool about it, I realized that like most women, like I think, go through life and just sort of like accept negative body image and like everything like disordered eating as like a part of life, and like that's just something that we do, and like we're not supposed to challenge it, or like you wouldn't even really know how to challenge it if you wanted to. But the body project was really cool because it talked about like there's a different way to live, and like this is how we're gonna do it, which I think was really cool, because like I think it pushed like women out of their comfort zones and like challenged the idea that like we're supposed to just live in that space, because like we're not.
Yeah, and note if anybody wants to participate in this, I think they're running virtual groups through the counseling center. Dr. Ashley Wilson is the staff psychologist who is in charge of this outreach program. So yeah, so know that might be available. Okay, Sarah.
Cool, thank you guys for sharing. I'm really interested in it. I had no idea that our counseling center had done this. And when you had mentioned it in the chapter that you and some of your, was it your researchers, I think, had gone to the body project training, I just had no idea.
Yeah.
But that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, the counseling centers bought the training, and then it was held 2 days over a weekend. And then Peyton participated, I think, after I did. Yeah, we weren't in the same group.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, guys. All right. Okay, so Operation Beautiful is an example of community intervention that has not been scientifically proven. So Caitlin Boyle is the creator, and her followers place uplifting, affirming post messages in salient places such as the women's. She has a website and a book that are full of positive testimonials from women who have suffered from eating disorders, stress, and depression. But because this hasn't been scientifically proven, there's a lot of critiques that Operation Beautiful has gone through. So what are some possible adverse effects of Operation Beautiful, and what are the consequences of not testing preventions with the scientific method? Something that I think that could be really negative for women, or really just anybody, but for women. Oh, let me go inside 1 second. So sorry.
It just kicked up a minute ago. Yeah, the wind. Hey,
Sorry, guys.
you can ask the question again, Sarah.
Okay. Let me go back. So what are some possible adverse effects of Operation Beautiful, and what are the consequences of not testing preventions with the science?
Had anybody heard of this before? It was a thing at ASU years ago. I mean, you would go into the public bathrooms and you would see these sticky notes. So like it caught on at ASU, and it was a thing for a little while. Had anybody heard of it? Kiara, you've heard of it?
Yeah, I think I don't really know how I heard of it, but I've like just known what it was.
It's not something that's in the residence halls. No. Okay. How do you all think you would respond to that? Say you go into a public bathroom and there's sticky notes or a sticky note on the mirror that's saying something affirmative, like you look great today, or I mean, the original notes was you are beautiful. How do you think you would respond personally if you saw something like that?
I can't remember what building it's in. I think it's like Edwin Duncan, but there's this one stall where it's just full of writing like positive notes and stuff like that. And I think I just kept, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just like the stall I wanted to use, but I found myself like I kept going in there and I kept seeing like what else was added to it or rereading the same thing. So it kind of made me feel better. And like also sometimes I just like ignored it. But I thought it was interesting how I kept going in that one stall.
I think I know which one you're talking about because I used to teach over there. And I'd always go to the bathroom right before I taught because it was an hour and 15 minutes. Yeah, how do others think you would react?
I think I personally would have like a positive reaction to that, but I could see if it was something like pointing out like physical beauty, then people that have really poor body image, that might just draw attention to the way they see themselves in the mirror. Instead of making them think I'm beautiful, it could just remind them of how they feel about themselves when they look in the mirror. I don't know, that's a potential like adverse effect maybe.
I know when I've seen it before, and again, it was a thing in Smith Wright for a while there. I felt positive about it because I felt like women were supporting women. But some of my personal reaction to it, like let's say one of them says, you are beautiful. Then my personal reaction to it is like, is that what we're supposed to be? You know, so it's like I had mixed feelings, if that makes sense. You know, like girl power and ugh.
I can say that it kind of rung hollow for me, and I think it's because like I don't want to be defined by my beauty, and so like I don't want to walk into the bathroom and be like it's like a nice gesture, and I would not be like negative towards it, but it also rings a bit hollow as well for me personally. So
this might be like slightly different, but I think it was my freshman year of college. I had a professor who I actually just like really liked. He was just a really good teacher and stuff. And he helped us like with tests, like taking methods and stuff like that along with the class. And he would tell us at the beginning of our tests, because he had pretty hard tests to write, like, you got this, or like, you're going to kill it, like above like your paper or something like that. And it kind of would like resonate with me because his tests were kind of hard. So every time I would flip to that page, I'd be like, okay, like you studied, you got it, like whatever. And so I start putting sticky notes on my mirror on like nights before I would have a test. So when I got ready in the morning, I would see it. Or I'd put like my alarm in the morning, it would be like, test today, like you're going to kill it or something like that. And so I know that's slightly different than like you're beautiful, but sometimes just like those little bit of like words of affirmation when you're not expecting it can like kind of go a long way.
Yeah, or I have like,
Oh.
no, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say I really like that, and I think something that is like important about the different levels of prevention is that about like the good ideas thing. There's like that's a great idea to like say you are beautiful, but each and every person like needs something different. Like you said, out like you needed the affirmation for your test, and like maybe you're like less confident in that or like something else, and so like each person needs something different. And I think and this is a little bit what I talked to my reflection too, that I think it's very important to have like specialized like something for each person specifically, and that's like the way that you can target fat talk is each person needs something different. And so when you go like to the like large scale prevention, sometimes you miss out on like what each and every person needs. And I know that's not like, it's kind of like a hard thing because you can't like meet with every single person, but just like on certain things that you can like just meeting that need for each person, I think it was a really good idea.
And Sophie, somewhere in this, I mean, when you get so specific to that individual, we're talking about psychotherapy then, right? Yeah. Katie, did you have something?
She kind of said what I said, but also to go off Allison, like I have an agenda that I write a lot in, and I can tell like I try to fill out the whole semester, like exams, tests and stuff like that. So like I try to say like you got it, or like you did it, like or you will do it, or good luck. And I really think that does help. And I think it can help more than like you're beautiful, you're so pretty, rather than like like you got this, like you woke up today, congratulations, keep going, you can do this and stuff like that. So I think that would help a lot of people, but I also agree that like not everything works on everybody, so it's really hard to find what's going to help each individual person. But thank you.
To echo what Katie was saying, like you are beautiful would be hollow to me, but like being valuable for what I bring to the table or what I've done would not be as hollow to me. So I guess it just like, I don't particularly like the emphasis on looks all the time, but like that we're all capable of doing something great, whatever we choose. So I definitely think, like you said, like I get the good idea, but sometimes it's like, we could also change the perspective some too, but everyone's different in that sense.
Yeah, it's almost like the body as object versus body as process is the way I kind of think about it. It's, if it's something that you could achieve or like make somebody smile today, or, go nail that exam, or, get that paper written, those kinds of things. Yeah. Things that we can behaviorally, things that we can control.
Anybody else have anything? Okay. All right, let me share screen. Okay, so the Lynch study. Lynch conducted a critical analysis of Operation Beautiful's book and website through communications research methodology. And Lynch critiqued Boyle's reference to negative body thoughts and dialogue as fat talk. Also critiqued Boyle's use of the fat talk term, considering that fat talk is more associated with fat talk stigma. And Lynch also criticizes the suggestion that Boyle makes regarding women's depression, anxiety, or eating disorders, and her suggested cure through women viewing themselves as beautiful. An example, reading a positive Post-it note. So Dr. Martz, correct me if I'm wrong, but Caitlin Boyle felt as if the Post-it notes, the positive Post-it notes, were going to change women's views about their body through reading the Post-it notes, correct?
Yeah. And there were a
Okay.
lot of, she received a lot of testimonials. There were a lot of people that reached out and said it was very helpful for them.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that, I think it's much deeper than just reading a Post-it note and completely like kind of the overnight effect, like, oh, I feel better about my body now and I'm, have positive self-image. It's much deeper than just reading Post-it notes.
And the affirmation literature, this kind of gets at like what Allison said. Allison, you probably studied well and are very capable at taking those types of exams. But we know affirmations work for people with high esteem. They tend not to work very well for people with low esteem. And a lot of that is because, having somebody say this really positive thing about themselves when they actually think negatively about themselves, it just makes it seem like, oh, the rest of the world feels great and I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like it works, but it depends on who. It works on some people and not everyone.
Yeah. And I think that you also mentioned right after that in the book about kind of some cognitive restructuring going on in therapy, right? About that's the deeper side of actually having positive body image.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything or have any questions? That was my last slide.
Any other thoughts? All right. Thank you, Sarah.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, Christina, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome.
Okay. I know that you touched on the Lynch, but the article, but I'm going to start there because that was at the top of page 160. So just to repeat a tad bit, so Lynch conducted a critical analysis of the Operation Beautiful website and book, specifically based on two previous counter discourse research studies, one by Johnson and Taylor in 2008 and one by Markula in 2001. And I actually went and read the Lynch article myself because I wanted to know more about like what exactly she was comparing it to. And then I went and read the Johnson and Taylor study, and I started reading the Markula study, but I thought that I wouldn't have enough time to cover all that. So I just said, okay, I'm not gonna do that. But I'm still gonna cover a little bit of Markula. So to begin with, I'm just gonna give a definition from the book on what a counter discourse campaign is. And it's an attempt to counter or undo the harm created by the common or normative media and marketing campaigns that take advantage of women's body insecurities. And so the first article that Lynch talks about is Johnson and Taylor in 2008. And Johnson and Taylor, they compare two different campaigns and how they approach this kind of counter discourse. And so the first one is Pretty Porky and Pissed Off. And you can see here on the right, these are some of the members of that. And so they were a small grassroots campaign formed in 1996 between two friends in Toronto who noted the absence of lesbian feminists in the queer arts scene. And so instead of just complaining about it, they decided they wanted to actually do something about it. They wanted to start making a change in their scene and in their community. So they got 10 friends together and dressed up in like camp and drag, and they went out to this busy shopping district and they passed out these fat facts along with stickers or flyers asking, do you think I'm fat? And so this event was to raise awareness on fat talk and fat phobia coming from, larger people. Like if someone hands you a sticker that says, do you think I'm fat? And it's from a larger person, that's going to invoke, a response. And that's what they wanted. And so there was a huge hit, and they gained new members, and they officially formed their group. And so then they continued to put stickers or flyers out in public areas, in addition to performing within the queer community, because that's what they originally had wanted to do. And so their group, I think at their peak, they had 8 members, and they wanted to process their feelings and personal experiences with fat phobia. And they used those personal and political experiences in their performance pieces. So they had a lot of different takes on pieces that were already out, as you kind of see. If you know anything about like drag queens, they do this kind of same thing where they play on previous plays or movies and things like that and twist it in their own kind of way. And they did stuff like that. And so they also held fundraisers and clothing swaps where women paid $5 for a bag of clothing that actually fit them. And they swapped clothes that didn't fit them for clothes that did. So it was like this nice like little way of like just recycling clothing and things like that. And they were always focused on body positivity in their own kind of unique way, as I mentioned. And this was all to get the community to recognize that gender and class implications on fat bodies. And so this is one of their flyers. I think I found it on like a random Facebook page. And so it says, you know, Queen Size Revolt, we play sports, we go to the prom, we are all ages, and we want clothes that are made to look good on our bodies. We don't have the time or money to seek out fatty specialty stores that may or may not have clothes which fit us. Every fat girl knows the humiliation of looking for clothes in stores that do not and will not carry our sizes. When you can't find anything that fits you, you feel alone and ugly. Well, fuck that shit. Women come in all different sizes. One person's chubby is another person's chunky, is another person's skinny, is another person's huge. Weight is relative. We're talking fat pride, which means, of course, you look good in those pants and you should be glad, or fat in those pants, sorry, and you should be glad. And so I just wanted to take a quick second here, just based on the information that I've provided so far about them. Like, I wanted to get you guys' opinions on what they were doing, because they kind of have this unique way of addressing, you know, fat talk. Because they try to invoke fat phobia in people. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in my next slide. But I just wanted to get you guys' opinions first on like what you think about them, and even if you had heard of them, because like out in Toronto, I definitely haven't. But I just wanted to hear you guys' thoughts so far.
A little more fun than Operation Beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. Because their performances, like I said, they were just different like plays and puns and takes on things that have already existed. Like there were some examples I didn't really understand what they were referencing, so I didn't talk about them. So that might be kind of like difficult to get an idea of what they said. But you know, just this like idea of like hosting fundraisers or even clothing swaps and things like that. I just wanted to know like if anybody had an opinion on that kind of thing that they were doing, their sort of activism. So Vivian said in the chat, I like the idea about being unapologetic and addressing fat phobia and fat talk. Yeah, no, definitely. They very much were, from what I can understand. But yeah, if nobody has any other thoughts, then that's totally fine. That's a question I just thought of at the last minute, so that's okay. So moving on. They tried to venture outside of Toronto without much luck, which is probably why a lot of us haven't heard of them. Their cultural expression of political and personal experiences were not understood because, you know, they had different politics and different personal experiences, and they were subject to much criticism because they put on plays, but like I said, their manner of dressing was not like, like professional, like Broadway kind of thing. Like in the description in the article, they said that they wore like tap shoes, but they were just flats with bottle caps like taped or glued to the bottom of them just to make the sound. So of course they were like, oh, you know, their acting's bad, but they're not trying to like act, they're trying to express their real experiences as real people. And so they were subject to a lot of criticism, and they just really weren't understood very well. And so they were thinking about traveling and you know, trying to express themselves even further outside. And so in 2003, they discussed a show that would require more traveling and would require them to give more time and resources to their show. And the members at this time, I think there were like 5 of them, they just decided that this was not something that they wanted to do. And so they disbanded. But they were nonetheless proud of their accomplishments and what they had done in their community, and, you know, the awareness that they had brought to fat talk and fat phobia. And I just love this like art piece right here. It shows like the different kind of people that were attracted to this scene and things like that. And I think it's just really great. And I hate that that happened. But one of their members did try to continue by joining a different group. I didn't look into that, so I don't know, you know, how well that went or if it's still going. But they really still did want to bring awareness to this in their own kind of way. But just as their grassroots activism was winding down, another campaign with more acceptance, resources, and influence launched. And this was Dove's campaign for real beauty. And this is talked about in the next part of the chapter that I didn't cover, but I wanted to cover it a little bit since it was in this article. And so the Real Women campaign launched in Britain with women who were multiracial, which I'll show in a second. And the success led to the launch of the multinational campaign for real beauty in September of 2004. And so these images here on the right, you can see that they are multiracial, and they do show different skin tones, which is nice, but I still feel like it could be better. I mean, obviously now I think we would have a lot more representation. For that time, they probably thought that they were doing a really good job, but it still could be better. And they were able to market this campaign everywhere. This was television, so commercials and TV shows, billboards, websites, and they even had their own website talking about like the campaign and things like that. And so these spaces they created allowed for feminist debate of ideals of beauty, and they got to promote their products, so it was a win-win for Dove. And so we can see here as well, this is an advertisement for their firming range. So it's like, new Dove firming range as tested on real curves. But like, again, the representation could have been better because I don't really find these women that curvy. They're all around the same body type. Like some are a little bit thinner than others, some are a little bit bigger than others, but roughly it's around the same thing. Like when we see curvy and thick women now in advertisements, I mean, you see such different body types. And I just feel like I said, for the time, they probably thought like, oh, a little bit thick is probably fine. But like, I feel like they could have done so much better. And honestly, on their billboards, they did a lot better. And this is discussed in the second part of the chapter. But they did a lot better job of showing more unconventional beauty standards. But nonetheless, Johnson and Taylor still found that despite contesting the narrow views of beauty, Dove still supported hegemonic ideology by not challenging the idea that beauty is essential to women's identity. And this is something that we talked about in this last presentation, is like, why is it that we have to focus on being beautiful, right? Like, why does that define my character? Why does it have to? And even in the billboards I was just talking about, where they show more unconventional beauty, they still want you to consider that person beautiful nonetheless, like even if they're wrinkled or have freckles or whatever. But like, why can't you just judge them as a good person, or someone that's wise because they're elderly and they have wrinkles or something like that? Like it always comes back to this physical beauty. And so Dove, instead of focusing on that, they wanted to make every woman feel beautiful, but they marketed it in a way that in order to be beautiful, they should be or would have to be using those Dove products. Just like the last image was like, oh yeah, you want your skin to look more firm, you should use our firming range lotion or body wash or whatever it was. And not to mention, as I said, the women in the images were like quite beautiful. They were usually pretty thin, they had beautiful hair. They did have different hair types and styles, which was nice. But even then, their depictions of beauty were not challenging that norm, even though they probably thought that they were, but it wasn't good enough. And so Johnson and Taylor said, oops, did not mean to do that, that neither the Dove campaign nor PPPO rejected the importance of physical beauty, but PPPO looked at the pain caused by beauty ideals, and they even had plays talking about their eating disorders, and they refused to prioritize beauty as the foundation of one's gendered identity. And they presented larger bodies as confident and sexy without bringing attention to the fact that they were larger. And they played with dissonant images of beauty in their performance pieces. So some examples that they had in this article were talking about how they would have like people who were larger wear like skin tight clothes and leggings to really accentuate those curves and everything going on. And it would kind of like bring out that disgust and that fat phobia in people in the audience being like, oh man, they should not be wearing that, kind of just invoking that body snarking kind of behavior and ideals. And then they would flip a switch and they would say stuff in their plays like, oh, I know that people look at me wearing this kind of thing and they're judging me and saying that I shouldn't be wearing this kind of thing, but like I look damn good, I look sexy, you know, I'm proud of my body, and you shouldn't be judging people. And you know, and it wasn't addressed to the audience exactly, but it was just posed in this way that would evoke the fat phobia just from seeing them, but then they'd also address it and make themselves look like real people. And so it would kind of bring attention to that body snarking and go, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't be saying these things about people or thinking them, because it does affect them and it causes them to have eating disorders and you know, anxiety about the way they look. And I really shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. So that's really where they began to make that change and awareness in their community. However, Dove avoided these concepts of pain and anger, making personal pride and social change appear painless and effortless. They didn't talk about, you know, these problems with body snarking or fat phobia or any sort of like eating disorders that people would have. They just said, oh yeah, if you think that you're beautiful, you'll be okay. And you can get beautiful by using our products, and everything will be great. And that it just wasn't the right approach. Like I could get where they were coming from, but there was just a lot more that they could have done. In addition, something worth noting is that both groups lacked attention to men's issues or their issues with body image. And like, I know that men don't focus on their body the way that women do. And it's mentioned in a previous chapter that women focus more so on their fat content, but men focus on their muscles. But there was no focus on that at all. There was no like personal accounts from men. And Johnson and Taylor noted that even that since Pretty Porky and Pissed Off was created by lesbian women and they have ties in the gay and transgender community, they still didn't have those people talking about it, especially like the trans people. I think would have been a great inclusion in that, to say kind of like their differences between when they were one gender versus another, and saying, you know, how they felt transitioning and things like that, and even just the negative things that come from that. And in Dove's case, Johnson and Taylor claimed that this perpetuates Dove's ideal of beauty through the male lens. And so going back to Lynch's article, it was Johnson and Taylor was compared against Marcula. And so Marcula noted the emphasis on women developing the ideal, which is unrealistic, body shape in fitness magazines. And so by comparing both of these articles, she said that both fitness magazines and Dove's campaign looked at beauty in a narrow manner instead of fully addressing societal beauty standards. And so one of the magazines that Marcula talks about is Shape. And so I found this was from 2008, and Marcula's article was 2001, but it still stands. And there's a lot of issues here with this that I would just like to cover. So starting at the very top, it says, I walked my way slim. I can't read it because the top bar is in the way, but I know it says something about losing 107 pounds. And this is really like controversial, because how are you going to lose that much weight just walking? Like, you can't just be eating McDonald's every day and then walk and lose over 100 pounds. And it doesn't say how long it took. It doesn't say what they were doing, because there's so much more than just walking that allows you to lose that kind of weight. So that just makes people think that, oh, if I just walk, I'll lose weight. And if they start walking, they don't lose weight, then they might get disheartened and stop. So that's frustrating. But then also, moving on to the left, in the orange, it says 4 weeks to your best butt, a customized plan to get it rounder and higher and firmer. And so, yeah, I know that some people like really do want to focus on certain areas of the body for themselves, but in a way you can look at that from the male gaze, because it is a sexualized part of the body, and just say, oh yeah, this is a way to make it look better for the men in your life and things like that. But then also 4 weeks, again, is that a realistic time frame for everybody? Is someone going to do it for 4 weeks and they don't see results and get disheartened? Are people who have mental disorders going to be debilitating them from doing it every single day? You know, are there things that talk about that kind of stuff? I doubt it. And so then underneath in the pink, it says, double your nutrients with every bite, 9 effortless diet tweaks. Well, are they really effortless? Because as we talked about in a previous chapter as well, that there are certain communities that don't have access to, like, you know, grocery stores that are close by, or even healthy food options. They're just surrounded by fast food. So like, can it really be effortless for every person and every socioeconomic status? So I don't really think so either, but apparently they consider it to be. And then on the bottom it says dress 5 pounds thinner. Like that was just weird to me. I don't know much about like fashion and like dressing thinner. The only thing I could think of is like, you know, horizontal lines make you look wider and then vertical lines make you look thinner. So, but apparently they have some tips on how you would dress to look thinner. And that's just saying that thin is the ideal body. And then the most controversial part to me is, you know, showing the sexiest bodies in Hollywood, enough of the fad diets and super skinny stars, even though they have Ali Larder here, who is looking very skinny. Also, she played Nikki in Heroes, who had DID, so that's definitely worth noting. But like, they're like, oh, enough of the super skinny stars. Well, what is she supposed to be? Like, is that not super skinny? It says these, you know, sculpted celebs share their sensible diet and exercise secrets. Again, sensible diet, is it really sensible for everybody? Like, what, can we not talk about the intersections that this would inhibit? And so you can kind of see some ideas that Marcula was talking about in these kinds of magazines and things like that. And she went into more detail about the specific magazine and the articles that were in it, not just the cover, but we can kind of just see from here, like some of the damaging things that were in there and what Lynch was trying to compare this to, in comparison to what Johnson and Taylor talked about between Dove and Pretty Porky and Pissed Off. So now we're going to talk about what Lynch did as far as their research methods. So they randomly selected a month from 2010, and they chose 2010 because Operation Beautiful launched in 2009, and they thought this was ample time to get enough posts and things like that. And it happened to be April that they randomly selected, which I thought was interesting because it's April and this was done in 2011. So this analysis is 10 years old, so we can kind of see the comparison to where things were then and now. And so Operation Beautiful's, as we've talked about, solution to ending negative self-talk or fat talk was to take notes from cognitive behavioral therapy in a way and to replace those negative thoughts with positive ones. And Lynch felt that the focus on the individual can cure problems by telling themselves they are beautiful is simplistic, just as we've talked about. Like, just because telling you that you're worth your physical beauty, it's hollow. And this is much like the advice that we see in the fitness magazines, as we can just see from this one cover. And the focus on individual transformation ignores the complex socio-cultural problems with beauty and ignores individual pain and shame from society, much like Dove's campaign did as well. So you can kind of see the comparison in those articles that I had just discussed. And in addition, I thought it was worth noting that there was no distinction among beauty standards from other cultures, because Operation Beautiful was to get women all over to talk about their struggles with body image and things like that. But there was no talk about like, oh, in my culture, beauty looks like this, and this is what I struggle with, and things like that. And I thought that it would have been interesting if they had shown that to see the dynamic between different cultures, but there was nothing. There was just kind of like that westernized view of culture, beauty and culture. And so Operation Beautiful also focuses on losing weight through eating healthfully, but it does not address the complex barriers individuals could face when attempting to do so. And that's something I've talked about, you know, with the Shape magazine cover here, and how it ignores like the intersections of socioeconomic status and even, you know, mental health. Are you going to be able to get out of bed to go to the grocery store to buy those kinds of things, and, you know, things like that that can be just debilitating on your everyday. It just doesn't really discuss those kinds of things. It just says, yeah, you can eat healthy, but one, what does that look like? And two, is that accessible for everybody? Can we get some more options? But it's just very simplistic, as Lynch said. And so again, as the Dove and PPPO campaign, there was no focus on men. And I thought that it would be interesting if Operation Beautiful kind of did an outreach thing with men. And I get that women need this affirmation. Not everyone. I mean, I know that I do. It's my love language. But like, I still feel like, having a focus on men would be nice, because they do struggle with body image too, as we talked about. But because they have no accounts from men, it implies that beauty and confidence is assured through that male gaze, and that women need to work on themselves and men do not. Now, to say that men do not is false, but you can make that accusation or assumption just based on the information that's presented. But we know that men do feel the need to work on themselves because of society pressures, their muscular content and everything. But again, you can make that assumption because it's not even mentioned. And so Operation Beautiful, again, much like these other campaigns, never challenges women's attitudes on the focus of beauty. And so some questions that I have, are, do you agree with Lynch's criticism of Operation Beautiful and the comparison to the Dove, PPO, and the fitness magazines? And if these counter discourse campaigns were not the best approaches to addressing beauty standards and fat talk, how should they improve? And do you know of any campaigns now that are exhibiting better counter discourse behaviors?
There's certainly some role models, like Lizzo comes to mind, and I didn't know about Lizzo when I was working on writing this. But she's kind of unapologetic, and she's all about like fitness and health, but body positivity and showing her body as she sings and that type of thing. So I think about role models. Does anybody else know of any campaigns that you've seen? I have not.
So one campaign that I talked about in my reflection that definitely does challenge more of the idea of beauty was Aerie's real life campaign. And so they did a huge campaign on people with disabilities, of like people with disabilities in lingerie and wheelchairs and ostomies and diabetes, insulin pumps. And so like I actually work for a camp with kids with bladder and bowel conditions who have like a range of disabilities, and all of us counselors also have conditions. And so it's like a peer-to-peer support. And so it was a really big deal when that came out, I think in 2018. But the criticism that I said in my reflection was like, that was like a one-time thing. Like, it's not like a public thing on their website all the time. So it's like they challenge this idea, but it still puts people with disabilities at like people on a pedestal, like, oh yeah, we'll show you every once in a while, but not all the time. And so like I liked their campaign and the fact that it did challenge the idea of especially like ability more with beauty. But I didn't like the fact that they didn't continue it as much. So yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely really interesting, like talking about disability and things like that, and making things accessible to people, not just based on, their beauty and things like that, but just you want to like show all types of people. So I think that that's very important to do as well. It's definitely something that gets in the way. But if nobody has anything else, I will go ahead and continue because I realize I don't have that much time. So we'll move on. Okay. Is that, yeah, okay. So I talked just a moment ago about cognitive behavioral therapy and how that is, replacing your negative thoughts with more positive ones. But it's talked about in the book that acceptance and commitment therapy can also be great for combating fat talk. And so it is a form of psychotherapy that uses acceptance and mindfulness with committed behavior changing strategies to increase psychological flexibility. And then the image at the top is the ACT hexaflex is what it's called. And it has all of these different parts of it. And so breaking down each part, I'm going to start with acceptance in the top left. So, it's the willingness to experience difficult thoughts and just accepting that they're going to happen. And then you have being present in the moment, in the here and now, and that's more so the mindfulness piece. Then you need to discover what's important to you and what values you hold. And then you need to take action and commit to pursue the important things in your life. And then you need to see yourself as unchanged by time and experience. And this also kind of plays in touch with mindfulness, seeing yourself as context. And then there's the diffusion piece, which is a really big piece, and that's observing your thoughts without being ruled by them. Again, comes back to that meditation piece. And I've been doing a lot of meditation lately for extra credit in one of my classes. So we've talked about like a lot of these things, and I think that would be a good thing to implement, as well as the acceptance commitment therapy for someone who's just struggling with anything. So Wagner in 1994 did a classic little study here where he had participants not think about a white bear. He just said, don't think about a white bear. But then most people did, because you're telling someone not to think about something, but then of course they're going to do that thing. And so then he said, well, don't think about a white bear, but I want you to think about a fire truck. And then they ended up thinking about both anyway, most times. And so if you think about that kind of thing, like thoughts are just going to happen and you really can't control them. And so a quote that I really enjoyed was, thoughts are addictive. We cannot subtract them, and we cannot not think. And so, you know, all of these pieces to the ACT hexaflex that we see, you know, just being acceptant that you're going to have these thoughts and that it's okay. And even if it's a negative one or a positive one, or one that you would never thought that you would ever think, it's going to happen. And that's okay, you know, because that doesn't define who you are. And so you just need to distance yourself away from those thoughts and diffuse them, because thoughts drive behavior and emotion. And if you can diffuse or distance yourself away from those thoughts, you can, you know, feel a little bit better. And so as CBT seeks to replace those thoughts, ACT gets you to realize that your thoughts are normal. And again, distance yourself or diffuse them. And I had started seeing a counselor at the end of last semester because I had a lot going on, and I was feeling really anxious a lot. And he told me, you know, to try to kind of recognize that I was feeling anxious and make a note of that. And that's another meditation piece. It's called noting. Just like being like, oh yeah, I'm really feeling this kind of way right now, but not letting it control you. Just saying, maybe there's nothing I can do about it, but I'm not going to let it control me because I've taken note of it. And so to demonstrate this a little bit, I have this TikTok video that I saw yesterday. So I just put that in my slide. Oh, hold on. I think I have to turn on my sound. 1 second. Oh my gosh. Okay. Zoom is hard. Share sound. Okay, let's start that over.
This presentation is freaking me out.
You guys hear it?
Where is that music coming from?
I guess you wonder where I've been.
Oh, that makes sense. What's up? What you mean, what's up? I came here to ruin your day, sis. Shut it all down. Why don't you look distressed? Well, I've been in therapy for a little bit because you've been around for a minute, sis. And as a result, I realized anytime you pop up, I'm gonna just make it rain on you. What the freak does Lil Wayne have to do with this? Not Lil Wayne, try to keep up. R is recognize the emotion, A is accept the emotion, I is investigate why you're feeling it, and N is non-identification. So you know that it won't define you. I don't really have time for this whole, you know, I've already given you some education. So I'm gonna get back to this. Did you need anything? Well, I guess not. I just wanted you to know I was here. Cool, because I don't really have time to make you a snack anyway. Have a seat. What the?
So I thought that was really great because it's like, you know, you just notice that it's there and it's just going to be there, but not letting it control you. And so there's this little cartoon I found as well. And I can't really read it because stuff's in the way, but essentially it's just saying that we get hooked with these unhelpful situations, and we can unhook ourselves by diffusing the situation and moving towards our values and our goals, and taking action to do what matters. And so my discussion question for this slide here is to just ask if anybody would be willing to share an example of like their fat talk or their friends' fat talk or family members, and how the techniques that we've discussed, either the ACT ones or even in this video or from this little clip here, this little image, and how that could help diffuse the situation and make it better.
So what if you heard somebody say, like, you shouldn't eat that? Like, let's say you go for some food and they said, you shouldn't eat that. what would be a way of kind of taking that thought and where that thought might go for some of us? And then what would we do about that? Because I think my first thought, if I had heard somebody say you shouldn't eat that, I think my first thought would be, I shouldn't eat that. But then I'd probably go, wait a minute, why? Why or why not? And does this person just have some food rules that I don't have?
I think I've heard that a lot for like portion sizes. Like if I have a meal and then like I'm still kind of hungry or I want seconds, people say, oh, like you're gonna have more, or like, oh, aren't you full? And sometimes it's like, no, I want more and I'm gonna have more because it was good or because I want to treat myself today or what have you. But it's definitely that first thought that goes through your head is like shame. It's like, oh, these people are judging me for eating more food.
Yeah, no, one of the examples I gave in my therapy was like, you know, if I did something, cut someone off in traffic or something, I might think to myself, oh my gosh, like this person hates me. They are probably mad at me, like whatever. And so you're making like all these assumptions, and it's about what other people feel about you. But even if they were to feel that way, I mean, one, you don't know, but two, why should you let it bother you, kind of thing. So like, even if somebody is going to judge you for eating something, I mean, let them, right? You know, if you can't control how they feel, the best you can do is just educate them. But if they're going to feel that certain way about you, then they're going to, and you should just, you know, live your life and be happy and do the things you want to do. And Peyton in the chat said, I think it's important to remember that other people shouldn't get to have the authority over your life and diet, and you have the power to make your decision. It's important not to give that a power to anybody else. So yeah, just, you know, just doing your own thing and not caring what they have to say. But I will go ahead and continue since I only have 10 minutes left now. So okay, it'll go. So Crandall in 1998 was the first person to document women's eating disorders in 2 sororities across an academic year, and he suspected going into the study that binge eating could be contagious. And so both sororities had a binge eating norm, both being that the most popular sisters ate the most. And the first sorority binge ate moderately, while the second pro binge ate, so they had differences there for comparison. And his findings showed that binge eating behaviors were more similar among the sisters at the end of the year versus the beginning. And he found that binge eating created a sort of group cohesion. And while it was not mentioned in his study, it's suspected by Dr. Martz that this was due to fat talking. And I can see that, you know, the women just saying things about their body, and then they just said, well, you know, I should just eat, or doing all kinds of things can lead to this kind of group cohesion, and then contribute to the results that we see where they have more binge eating behaviors at the end of the year. And then the next study that was discussed was Wood, Barkalow, Tilka, and Augustus Horvath in 2010. And it was a qualitative study using interviews from 15 college students who had positive body image and how they gained that positivity. And so they found several themes, and these were, you know, body appreciation, acceptance and love, broad and not hegemonic views of beauty, inner positivity, religion and spirituality, exhibiting healthy behaviors, and many more. And the people in this study said that their friendships they sought out with other women were those who exhibited those healthy, positive behaviors versus those who engaged in fat talk. And some even reported avoiding others who fat talked altogether because it wasn't good for their self-esteem. And they felt that the attitudes about body image were contagious, as we were just kind of discussing a little bit with the last slide. So they may as well surround themselves with people who talk positively about themselves, because if it's going to be contagious, you might as well let the positive be contagious versus the negative. So some questions real quick. So what kind of friends do you surround yourself with? Do you surround yourself with those who fat talk or those who do more positive body talk? And after learning about Fat Talk in this class, have you cut off friends who persistently engage in it, or do you try to educate them first before doing so? And I know that we talked about this a little bit with the last presentation, but just in general, like, do you, after learning this information, do you surround yourself around people who are more positive? Or even do you find your friends being more positive now that if you have informed them of what we've learned?
Have any of you found that your friends are open to discussing this, just like kind of talking about it? And I'm curious, has anyone seemed like they've had their feelings hurt in any way in talking about it? Because that's the concern a lot of times, is not wanting to say something wrong or be harmful to a friend. Or I'm curious if you all have talked about it with friends. Is it like not responding to their fat talk, but just like bringing it up, like what you're doing in class, what you've been reading, that kind of thing? Has that been more the kind of the type of discussion? Yeah, a little more intellectual kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have that many friends, so I can't really speak on this. That's just the introvert in me. But, you know, ever since learning about this kind of stuff with like my partner, I've definitely talked to him about that and tell him like it's not just the body fat percentage, it's just the negative talk in general. And, you know, I've definitely worked on it myself, and I feel that having this knowledge now, for the friends that I make in the future and for the people that I, you know, hang out with, if I do hear these kinds of things, if it's, you know, themselves fat talking, or if their body snarking others, I could kind of just say, hey, that's not good. Like, that's, you know, perpetuating this misogynistic view, and, you know, we don't need to be speaking like that. It hurts not only ourselves, but it hurts other people too, if they are body snarking, and, you know, just the effects that it can have on people around you too, and how contagious that could be. So I definitely feel that I could bring some light to the situation. And I think that if I did have a friend who was being really negative on their self-talk, that even after I tried to educate them, if they just refused outright to just continue it, I'd probably like just be like, I can't really be around you at this point anymore. I don't really cut friends off like that, so I think it would be hard for me to do, but I do think that in the end it would be best for me probably to do something like that. So, you know, if you guys have friends who continue to do that after education, you know, do what's best for you. That might be letting them go. So yeah, I will go back to sharing. And then the next piece is Bonnie Rochman wrote about how the Tri Delta sorority, and how ever since 2008, they have maintained a Fat Talk free week during the academic year to bring awareness to the issue of fat talking in an attempt to end it. And they also promote self-care and healthy body positivity, and give students the opportunity to not respond to their friends' fat talk if they normally would. And then signage on campus and social media have statements like "Friends don't let friends fat talk" to challenge that interpersonal discord. And Miami University's Tri Delta sorority partnered with Operation Beautiful, actually, back in 2014 to spread positive Post-it notes on bathroom mirrors across campus, according to Molinaro. And this is something that, like, you talked about how it was popular at here at App, and how there were these notes in the bathrooms too. So it kind of seems like it spread around. And so Garnett et al. In 2014 recruited 2 New England college campuses planning on participating in the Fat Talk Free Week as a pilot evaluation of that social media campaign. And so students completed a 20-minute online survey 2 weeks before and after the Fat Talk Free Week, with items involving self-fat talk and peer network, physical comparison, and other items. And the post-test asked if the Fat Talk Free Week had a positive effect or impact, if they felt it was important, and if they felt like it was relevant to their life. among other questions. And so the post-test scores showed a decrease in self-fat talk among peers, and less body satisfaction overall. So all those things were lowered after the Fat Talk free week. And so 50% of participants said that they almost always or often participated in Fat Talk before, but only 34% in the post survey said that. So that shows that decrease. And the relevance of the campaign to the personal goals of the students resonated with them because they just felt like they wanted to lower this Fat Talk discord. And it showed in their behavior changes, as you can see, going down 16%. So that was really great. And even though pluralistic ignorance was not discussed, it was still operating subconsciously, probably, where some women thought that even though they liked that higher self-esteem commentary, they probably thought other women preferred the Fat Talk due to it being the more commonly known norm. And in addition, students may have reported less Fat Talk because that was what it was expected. And observing conversations would have been interesting to see if the campaign was truly making a difference, though I still feel like that would have been difficult to do because people may have still felt like they were inclined to act a certain way because cameras were on or people were watching them. So it would have been interesting, but I don't really know how that would have been done. But either way, you can see that there is a decrease, whether that was expected or if it was genuine. And so some questions I had is like, how would you like it if app participated in this Fat Talk free week? What kind of impact do you think it would have? And should the Fat Talk free week be limited to just college campuses, or should it be on all campuses? I know we talked a little bit about how this discourse should be brought up with girls in young ages, elementary school, middle school, things like that. And I think that it should. And I think that having it even at our university too would be great, because that would go obviously great with your work. But it would spread this idea to more people than just the people that take this class. So I just wanted to bring that question out to everybody to see if they feel that app should do it, or how, what kind of impact do you think it would have?
I've wondered at times with Tri Delta that after the sorority runs the Fat Talk free week and they sort of know why they're doing that, it makes me wonder when they do their rush the next year, if that has anything to do with who they decide to select and admit into their sorority. But it makes me wonder if it starts to, by hosting Fat Talk free week, does it establish this, we're not going to do this norm? And then it makes me wonder if it's a bit of a turnoff if they, engage with women who are doing it, who are engaging in it.
Yeah, like the previous study, where their friends, they don't associate with them if they're fat talking. So I can definitely see that kind of like bias coming into play. And I don't know really anything about fraternity or sorority life here on campus. So I don't know if there's a particular sorority that would benefit from this sort of Fat Talk free week or advertising, or if there is a sorority that already kind of implements these ideas too. So that's something to think about as well. But I think, it would be great, as I said, on our campus. I can just see the stairs going up to the library, like filled with flyers and talking about it, and, just so much like advertisement. And I can see maybe even like activities out on Sanford Mall and things like that. I think that would be really fun. I don't know what, but we could make it interactive. We have like the space to do it. So I think that would be great to implement, should we wish to. But either way, I know that I'm running behind, but I just had a lot to say. So I'll try to speed through this last bit. So there's a minority influence on social psychology. So Warshall, Grossman, and Coutant in 1994 found that minority groups were defined by both sheer numbers and relative social powers. And so nearly 20 years prior, Moscovici in 1976 suggested that the best way for minority groups to overpower the majority would be to boldly reveal in public what has been the case in private, and openly adopt a behavior that most individuals would themselves like to carry out. And because of this kind of minority influence on the majority, celebrities and sorority sisters and people that are considered to have a more so minority view could have an impact and positive effect on those who hold the fat talk versus self-accepting norm. And so Keir in 2002 discussed passive and active advocates. So active advocates are the anti-fat talk and body snarking role models because they are aware of popularity of their opinions and have conversations with others about these topics, and they're willing to have those conversations. And these are celebrities that we've mentioned in the past, like Emma Watson and Amy Schumer. And so then passive advocates support unpopular ideas, and they're not aware of the popularity of their opinions, and they do not converse in ways that would reveal their true beliefs or topics on, or their true opinions on that topic. And so they kind of support that fat talk to themselves, but they still believe in that body positivity and commentary. And so, for example, the Fat Talk Free Week collab with Operation Beautiful allowed passive advocate women to feel okay about supporting other women's body image positivity and allow them to be open and air their beliefs versus keeping them quiet as they normally would have. So it gave them a space and a platform, so to speak, to feel that way and be more active in how they truly felt. And so some last questions that I had is like, how does it feel to see or hear celebrities speaking up against fat talk norms and discuss their personal issues with it and their damage from it? I know we see a lot of celebrities as not real, but to see them break down and explain these things such as like eating disorders or issues with their own body positivity, I feel like it makes them feel more real. And so in addition, how can they, as like influencers or active advocates, continue to push back and make a difference in our society on these beauty standards? And what would it look like for them to do that?
Are there other celebrities that we haven't mentioned that you would consider to be good role models for this stuff? Anybody?
None come to mind off the top of my head, but I'm not super into like following celebrities or anything, so I'm not positive. But something that I do think is interesting is when you get people like Lizzo who are like really pushing this beauty standard and being very open and vocal about it, is it kind of like forces media outlets to focus on it too. And the word kind of spreads a bit faster that way, which I think is really interesting when you have like people who have power or influence speaking up about this.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I mentioned a couple of weeks ago during someone's presentation that Kendall Jenner came out on her Instagram and was talking about her issues with her low self-esteem and way that she views her body and everything, even though she's a great body type. Oh my gosh, my cat's meowing at the door. And I just feel that, like I said, it just makes these people feel more real, and they have a lot more influence than they know. So for them to bring attention and awareness to, fat talking, body snarking, fat phobia, eating disorders, just all these things that are connected, it really brings that awareness out to people who don't know it or aren't being educated in these kinds of things like we are in this class. And it allows them to also like educate their friends in response. And I just think that, as influencers and people who are, actively trying to advocate for these kinds of things, that we just need more people to speak up, like Lizzo, like Emma Watson, Amy Schumer, all the people that we mentioned, and we need people trying to actually make a difference and change the rhetoric to actually provoke change in the society. So but that was all that I had, and I know I ran over, but yeah, if anybody has any additional comments or questions or anything, I'm good.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. I will see you for the last class next Tuesday. Take care. Bye.